Hey, this is Chris for JamPlay.com, and I'd like to welcome you to another 6 weeks of beginning guitar. Now, the last 6 weeks, we spent a good deal of time on getting to know different scales up and down the neck. You got to apply each scale over a nice musical context, a rhythmic context, a chord progression that made sense with the scale that you were using, so you were able to experiment. And we really didn't give you a whole lot of rules either. We basically said, here's the scale, here's the track. Once you learn the pattern, be as musical as you can over it. Now, if you rewind to the 6 weeks before we tackled the scales, we spent time on chords and strumming primarily. What we're going to do in this next 6-week course is bring chords and scales together. We're also going to use arpeggios in our practice. And arpeggios is basically just a way of saying that they're chords that you're going to be playing one note at a time. So we're going to be studying those as well. I will also be introducing to you one of my favorite ways to practice. Now, don't get me wrong, I love using backing tracks, and that also is one of my favorite ways to practice. But when you start getting to a certain point in your guitar journey where you know enough to kind of move around the neck a little bit, you know some chords, you know some scales, like you do now, there's something really, really rewarding and almost comforting about sitting down with a drone track, which is what you hear going on in the background, and it's what you're going to be using over the next 6 weeks to really familiarize yourselves with these scales and chords in context. The cool thing about drone tracks is that it gives you a tonal center to play around with, but you don't have to use rhythm right now. So it does the same thing as a backing track by giving you a little bit of context, but it doesn't limit you by a chord progression. It just gives you a center. So with these drone tracks, with these pad tracks, you're going to have the ability to experiment with one chord, one scale, and one arpeggio per week. Be as musical as you can. You have the freedom in time, meaning, there's no groove necessarily, to, how does this note sound over the track? How does this note sound with this note? I've got a C chord, and I just finished playing the scale, and I know that this note's in there. What happens if we add that to the C chord, for example? And we're going to be doing this in the keys of C, A, G, E, and D. You're going to notice week by week that as we go to different open position patterns and positions and ideas, that if we take these shapes and move them up the neck, now we're only dealing with major scale and major chords for the whole 6 weeks, but you're going to notice there's going to be opportunities for us to work up the neck and play around with different chords in our practice sessions. So I'm really excited about this next 6 weeks, not only because we're bringing chords and scales together, something we haven't done quite yet in beginning guitar, but you're learning a way to practice that you're going to be able to take with you the rest of your life. You learn something new, you learn a new technique or melody or chord or scale or whatever it is, flip on the drone track and see how musical you can make it. See how dynamically, you just learned it, but how musical can you make this chord? How musical can you make the scale? What new things can you discover about a simple C major chord because you're giving yourself the bandwidth? You're sitting with that chord for 15 minutes. You're sitting with the scale that's associated with the chord for 15 minutes. You're sitting with the arpeggio. What can you discover? How can you change it in a way that's going to inspire you to do something that you never would have thought of? And this is so much more effective than reading a book on intervals and learning a bunch of interval patterns. That's kind of cool too, and it can give you some inspiration. But you're going to discover a lot of this sort of by accident as you're playing and practicing in this way. You're moving up in the realms of beginner guitar. It's still going to be simple. Bring your electric, bring your acoustic, and join me for this sort of contemplative next 6 weeks of playing guitar. See you there.